viewers, please bear with us. We'll do our best to fix them and carry on. And we welcome all those tuning in online. First of all, acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are meeting and pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and the elders from other communities who may be watching today. Recording of council meetings. Please note that today's meeting is being audio recorded. This recording will be uploaded to council's website and will be accessible by the general public. By participating in and addressing those present at the meeting, you consent to any information disclosed, including personal or sensitive, being recorded and uploaded to the website. I'll read the prayer. Almighty God, we humbly beseech your blessing on the council, direct and prosperous deliberations for the welfare of the people of the Moyne Shire. Amen.
Amen.
Any apologies?
There are no apologies.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest for any item on today's agenda? No. Thank you. Confirmation of minutes from the ordinary council meeting, the 28th of July. Do you have any questions, comments from councillors on that?
Yeah, Mayor.
Councillor Dukas.
Thank you. It's in relation to answers from questions from Hamish Cummings at the last council meeting, and I believe that these questions were sent sometime earlier to the CEO. This being our last chance to have responses put in the council meeting agenda, I just thought I'd bring it up now to find out exactly how long Mr. Cummings has to wait for his answers.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Mr. Millard, CEO.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Dukas. I'll trace those responses up and ensure there's a response and report that back through council as well. So thanks for the reminder.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Councillor Dukas, anything further? Any questions or comments for the confirmation of minutes? In that case, I'll seek a mover. Councillor Parker is the mover, seconded by Councillor Ryan. Councillor Parker?
No, I have nothing to add. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Ryan? Okay, all those in favour of the confirmation of minutes from the 28th of July? All 7 councillors in favour. Voted unanimously. Public participation, we have none at this meeting. Just for future reference there, that it is able to happen via Zoom if those of the public are interested in doing it at the next meeting, if any item you'd like to speak to. Moving on to the first item on our agenda, the monthly financial performance report, to be presented by the Director of Community and Corporate Services, Mr. Kevin Ledden. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. This report is for the first month of our new financial year, the 2021 financial year. So not a lot to report, early days, I suppose, but a couple of things to note. The impact of COVID, and I guess we'll continue to monitor that as we work through this financial year. Caravan park revenues will be impacted, as we know, under the second lockdown, for instance. It seems that generally, though, there won't be significant financial impacts, but we don't know what will happen beyond the current lockdown. So I think we just note that, councillors, and we keep an eye on it. Also, I note a question from Councillor Ryan earlier regarding carryovers, and they will come back to council. I think it'll be the next meeting. So incomplete projects with accompanying budget, as they normally do, will come forward and be added to the current year. So that will probably be at the next meeting. At the moment, there's not a detailed capital works commentary. The finance team are obviously focused on the year end for the 19-20 financial year and completing audit at the moment. So all of those cut-offs are completed and the financial statements that will come back to council. So that's a focus. We've got to get Fargo audit clearance. All of those audits are being done remotely. So it's a bit of a challenging year, as we know, with COVID. Things are taking a little bit longer, but that is their main focus right at this point in time. This financial report for the first month includes some variations. I should point out in the recommendation it refers to attachment 4. It's in fact attachment 2. And those variations are income and expenditure of $2.7 million, so a net nil to council, which is the federal government's stimulus package that's been allocated to Moyne Shire. Mr. Greenberger might update us on the number of projects shortly on that, but council are aware of a range of projects right across the Shire that will be funded under that, so that is a bonus. There's $20,000 for additional bus shelters. There's $15,000 as per previous workshop agreement around a cultural management plan for the Belfast Coastal Reserve. And there's also $60,000 a budget variation for works at the quarry as a result of an internal audit and their recommendations. So the recommendation, Mayor, is that the finance report be received and the council approve the variations as listed in attachment 2. So happy to take any queries.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Before we have a mover and a seconder, is there any questions on this report? Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Mr. Greenberger, just regarding, obviously, you stated that the Capital Works program isn't in there this month, but just seeking an update for the public about the Port Fairy Railway Place playground. We allocated $100,000 for last year. And also, would you like to respond to the 3 individually or all together?
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Mr. Greenberger. Playground.
Yeah, sorry, Mayor. Yeah, the Railway Place playground. Following a council workshop, the officers are actually revisiting the scope of that project. They're going to have a look at different ways of delivering it, and we'll bring back a future workshop report to council.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Another second one.
Thank you. Regarding the East Beach, the night soil site, the ship tip as it's known, just regarding that, there's been some press recently, just a bit of an update about the progress there. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, council's been working with the Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning in relation to that project. We've actually come up with a project plan and submitted authority for consent or consent for authority to undertake those works. DELP have come back to us with a range of issues that we need to work with them on prior to that construction of the wall. What that means is that won't be happening in the current calendar year. That will be carried over to the next calendar year. Obviously, we need to think about the climatic conditions and tidal conditions of when we can construct the wall. But we're still working with DELP on those matters, and hopefully we'll get a result completed in 2021.
Councillor Lockett, third question.
Thank you. The final one's just regarding the caravan parks. I know I've seen some things go in at the Southcombe Park, and there's a bit happening at Gardens and also Yambuck. Just a brief update might be for Mr. Davies about the caravan parks and current works that are taking place.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Yeah, Mr. Davis, Director of Economic Development and Planning, would you like to answer that, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so there has been a bit of activity going on. You'll notice that Gardens, the installation of a new fence that's popped up over the last couple of weeks, and over at Southcombe Park, the amenities block has arrived and has been predominantly installed. There's just a couple of minor local trades to go to get that teed up. We're undertaking final planning for some of the larger assets as well, and tender accommodation and contractor engagement during the next scale of the individual projects. So, and where possible, as we've said before, utilising all local contractors where we can to provide those works. So there's a fair amount in scale that has already started to roll out.
Great, thanks, Mr. Davis. Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Smith has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question to Mr. Ledden on 1.3, the investments. I noticed that the Moyne Shire has 3 banks, the Commonwealth, the Bendigo and ANZ, and in the Shire, and the investments, there's none of these banks, apart from the CBA, represented in our deposits. have we deposited money with them in the past? And do you think there could be an opportunity of supporting the banks that are supporting our towns in the Shire? Not only banks, but ATMs in Mortlake, Port Fairy and Port Koroit. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Through you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Smith. So the placement of investments is governed by our investment policy, and that does provide for some discount for the Bendigo Bank. They've certainly won some business in the past, none at present, but at the moment it is a competitive process in terms of quotations for term deposits, etc. But don't know if that answers your question for Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you, Mr. Ledden. Like, as long as the Bendigo's had the opportunity to tender for these, and I think that we spoke of this last year, and there is a margin that they do have preference on. But no, look, that's, I'm just keen to support the banks that are supporting the Moyne Shire. That was all. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Other questions on the finance report? Councillor
Yeah.
Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. I've got 3 questions, if I may, 2 to Mr. Ledden and 1, I think, to Mr. Greenberger. The first question, or it might be 2 to Mr. Greenberger. The first question is regarding the discretionary reserves. I note that we've got $3.3 million in the waste facilities discretionary reserve, and I was wondering what plans we have in the near future to be using some or all of that money.
Through you, Mayor, yes. Thanks for the question, Councillor Parker. We have 2 particular projects in the capital works budget for this year to be taken from the reserve. One of those projects is for some design work for new ramps at the Karamat and Woolsthorpe transfer facilities. And the other one is to upgrade some of our public place bins because our new truck does cater for separation of recycling products and garbage products. So we'll be putting more recycling bins in our public places around the Shire in the coming months.
Thank you. Sounds good if we can get some more recycling happening. Also, Mr. Greenberger, while I'm speaking with you, when we look at the variations for the budget this month, I noticed that there's variations in both the operating and in the capital variations that are both regarding local roads and community infrastructure program. I was wondering if you could explain the difference why some is in there and some is in operations and some is in capital.
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Parker, the majority of the $2.7 million stimulus package will be spent on council projects and it'll be capitalised, so they'll become our assets. The only one we'll be forwarding money onto an external body is for Belfast Aquatics. So it's treated in accounting terms as an operating expense, whereas all the other works, footpaths, all the various projects will become assets of council and are capitalised. So that's the only distinction.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Ledden, on 1.6, looking at debtors, I noticed that infringements have doubled in the last month, and just wondering what that might be due to, whether it's anything to do with the virus or what might cause that.
We'll take that one on notice. Certainly the animal registrations annual process has contributed to the increase in those debtors, but I'll take the other one on notice. Thanks, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Dukas, thanks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, to Mr. Davis, the subdivision reserve, is that made up of the developer's community contribution?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. The subdivision reserve is made up of the 5% contribution under the Planning Environment Act and aligned to the Subdivision Act as well.
Right. It's been brought to my attention that a single lot subdivision, what I mean is a house on, say, an acre in Koroit, the owner wants to subdivide off half an acre and they've been told they've got to contribute to this subdivision reserve or the community contribution. Now, we never used to charge that on small lots. So can you find out between now and the next workshop when this came into play and why and who instigated it? What what planning officer came up with this brilliant idea?
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dugas. Mr. Davis will be able to take that one on notice. Yeah.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions for the
Yeah,
finance
another one,
report?
following from this recycle bins, from what Mr. Greenberger said, do we know at the moment how much contamination is in the recycle bins? Or can we do that audit when our truck starts operating? If it's got 2 compartments.
Yeah, through you, Mayor, two separate issues. So one is through our curbside collection contractor. And yes, we can gather those stats around the waste that might be contaminated. Happy to get those through to you, Councillor Dukas. Also, we can once we start the dual collection with our truck, we can do audits within our own truck. So our own staff collect our public place bins, and we could have a look at the levels of contamination in those bins once we start that collection.
Yeah, well, my main concern is the contamination in the public bins. I think the others, we've got a handle on that at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dugas. Any final questions? Okay, we'll seek a mover for the item 1, monthly financial report. Moved by Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Lockett. Councillor Parker.
Happy to move. I think we've been asked lots of questions as we normally do, and we've been given very relevant answers to them. So complete confidence in the finances. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well summarised by Councillor Parker. Just agree that, despite a global pandemic, Moyne's still in a strong financial position. I think that's, due to systemic long-term financial planning. Thank you.
Councillor Lockett. Any other councillors wishing to comment? I'll just make a quick comment that it's terrific to see that the variation this month for the bus shelters, especially out in rural Moyne, they play an important part of keeping kids safe and dry as they await for the bus. So an extra 20,000 there will certainly be helpful. In summarising to Councillor Parker, thanks.
Nothing further. Thanks, Mayor.
Thanks, councillors. All those in favour of item 1, please raise your
Aye.
hands. Aye. Yes, carried 7-0. Item 2, council delegations to the CEO will be presented by Director of Community and Corporate Services, Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. So, councillors, as we do from time to time, we update our delegations. We've got a range of delegations. This one deals with the council delegations directly to the Chief Executive Officer. This one's really been triggered by the new Local Government Act 2020. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the meeting, because a number of reports today address transitioning from the 1989 Local Government Act to the new 2020 Local Government Act. So this delegation is exactly the same as the previous delegation to the CEO, but with principally 3 changes. And these changes are required under the new Local Government Act. And they are that the CEO not appoint an acting chief executive for a period exceeding 28 days, that the CEO not adopt or amend governance rules, which we'll be adopting later in the meeting, and that the CEO not appoint a chair or members of a delegated committee. And again, we'll be addressing that later in the meeting. Apart from those additions to the delegations to the CEO, they remain exactly as they were under the previous delegation and the previous Local Government Act. So the report sets out some background around that, Mayor and councillors, but the recommendation is essentially the update of that instrument of delegation to the CEO. So happy to take questions, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions on item 2? No questions. We'll seek a
Yes.
mover.
Thank
sorry.
you.
Councillor Dukas
Yeah,
has a
I
question.
just thought I'd give
Sorry.
others a chance. To Mr. Ledden, under conditions and limitations, it's got a dollar value of 300,000. If a council decides to lower that amount of delegation, can it do so? I don't think it can raise it because it's under the Act, but can it, say, bring it back to 200 or 150?
Through you, Mayor, yeah, Councillor Dukas, that could be amended by virtue of amending this instrument. That's what governs that. So it could go up or down. I know in some councils, I think larger councils, for instance, it's $1 million. But it's what's considered appropriate for the size of the council, and that the $300,000 has been in place for quite some time.
Right, but it can, if need be, go up or down.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Seek a mover for the motion. Councillor Ryan is the mover, seconded by Councillor. Looking for a seconder, Councillor Lockett. Thank you. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As outlined by Mr. Ledden, this is a procedural motion brought about to the changes in the Local Government Act. Nothing further to add.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I concur with Councillor Ryan. Nothing further.
Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Put it to the vote, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, all those in favour of item 2, raise your hands. Item 2 is carried 7-0. Thank you. Item 3, council delegations to members of council staff. Once again, Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, in a similar vein, this delegation S6 is delegations from the council to members of council staff. This is a regular update. We subscribe to Maddox's legislative update service, as does most councils. So the need to update our delegations is triggered by changes in legislation. Council operates under a wide range of acts and regulations, and they change regularly. So it's normally about annually we bring these in. Also, we obviously have the new Local Government Act. So again, this instrument is updating relevant changes for amendments to various pieces of legislation. As the report sets out, this time around, there's been changes to the Rail Safety Act, the Road Management Act, the Local Government Act, and the Residential Tenancies Act. So again, this instrument is the previous instrument updated for those particular changes. And as is the case across all local governments, if council doesn't delegate anything, no officers are empowered to operate across and deliver all the services that local government does. So they're a necessary part of council. And again, the recommendation is the updated instrument. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Ryan as the mover, seconded by Councillor Lockett. Again, thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per the previous item, this is a procedural motion brought about by the changes to the Local Government Act. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll agree again. Nothing further. Procedural matter. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? No. Okay. Councillor Ryan has summarised already. So all those in favour of item 3, please raise your hands. Yep, carried 7-0. Thank you. Okay, up to item 4, committees structure under the Local Government Act. Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, this is another report that's coming to you and brought about by changes to the Local Government Act. I just thought, just to remind all of the journey that you and us have all been on, it's about a 5-year journey. So when the state government decided that it was timely to rewrite the Local Government Act, the 1989 Local Government Act, and update it with the 2020 Local Government Act. Goes back about 5 years, started off with technical working groups. You might recall, council, that a directions paper was put out. Our council, like many stakeholders, undertook consultation and also made a submission around the various proposals under the legislation. That was about to come to fruition in 2018, and then we ran into the state government election, so it was put on hold. We then had a change of local government minister who made further changes to the proposed 2020 Act, and it finally got enacted in March of this year. So just remembering it's been quite a journey to transition from what was going to be a new local government act many years ago to it finally being enacted just this year. So a lot of these reports that we're bringing to council are required by September 1 under the stage 1 requirements of the new local government act. And I just wanted to note the contribution of our org development manager, Susie Cooley, across that journey, which has been quite significant. And also we were able to secure the services of Jim Gifford, who is a local government governance expert who's assisted us with a number of these reports. Item 4, the committee structure requires all councils to review and update its committee structures in accordance with the new Act. So in essence, what council had as Section 86 committees under the previous Local Government Act now either become delegated committees or community asset committees under the new Act. So what this report is recommending is that council have one delegated committee, being the Port of Port Fairy, and the report following this sets out proposed delegations for that committee, which are exactly the same as they have at the moment, so that it would transition with its current membership and its current delegations under the 2020 Act. And for the remaining committees listed in the recommendation, being the Croydon Theatre, the Mortlake Rec Reserve, the Narrandera District Community Facility, Southcombe Park Committee, and the Vic Park Committee, all Section 86 committees up until now under the 1989 Local Government Act, they become community asset committees with the current members that are listed in the schedule to this report. So they transition as the same, but become community asset committees from the date of this resolution. And as suggested by Councillor Parker earlier, there is an addition to the fourth part of the recommendation, Mayor, to add on to the end of the membership schedule until the membership is renewed in line with the 4-year term of council. So, Mayor and councillors, the report sets out the context around the requirements of the new Local Government Act and what is required, the requirements of a delegated committee, which are quite onerous compared to a community asset committee. So a lot of context there, but the recommendation is there to transfer those committees with current membership so they can continue on until those memberships are renewed. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Councillor Lockett has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question, Mr. Ledden, is, I found this a bit tricky in the past. Could you give a practical example of something that will be changing? Because, you know, it's the great work that all these committees and volunteers do isn't going to change, but the bureaucracy is changing. But can you give us, you know, a practical example of something that may change in the operations?
Through you, Mayor. So, Councillor Lockett, probably at the front end, not a lot of change. The way that the committees operate, in fact, will be a little less onerous because most of the requirements of a community asset committee, which can have delegations from the CEO rather than from council. And if you look at the requirements of a delegated committee, in terms of ordinary returns of members and some of the other requirements, effectively the same as you as a councillor, will in fact be a little less onerous. So the functionality of the committees, I believe, won't change at all. It's probably the governance arrangements, hopefully, will be a little easier.
Right, thank you.
Other questions for Mr. Ledden?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Dugas.
Thank you. Yeah, to Mr. Ledden, the report states that the CEO has to produce a final report at the end of the year. Is that correct? On these committees?
Sorry, Mr. Duke, Councillor Dukas, can you refer me to a page in particular?
No, because I didn't highlight it, but I read somewhere where the CEO produces an end of financial year report on committees.
If I can assist there, Mr. Mayor, that's the case, I think, Councillor Dukas, that annually I would need to report into council on the operation of these committees, yes.
So when it comes to minutes, I mean, you would have to get your information from the minutes, wouldn't we as a council have to make sure that some of these committees are up to speed on their reporting and their minuting? So the CEO, otherwise the CEO is in no man's land.
Yeah, Mr. Ledden might be able to help with some training
Well, you
provided.
take it on notice
for-
anyway. It's a bit
Yeah.
technical, but if you want, take that on notice and come back to us.
Yeah, through me, happy to take on notice, but the intent, as I see it, would be that the minutes would be made available to the public. No, probably different than they are now, Councillor Dukas. Yeah, the ins and outs we'll take on notice.
Yeah, but it's just that some committees are a bit lackadaisical because not much happens. That's all.
Okay. Other questions for Mr. Ledden on item 4? Yeah, Mr. Ledden, just a quick one. So, impacts on the volunteers who sit on these committees. If there is any, they'll be assisted by our officers to transition over to a community asset committee or a delegated authority committee.
Sorry, Mayor, I just didn't pick the first part of that question.
No, that's no worries. I was just saying, if any impacts on the volunteers to transition over to a community asset committee, they'll be assisted through our officers.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, Jackie Anderson and her community development team will be working with each of the committees.
Yep. Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Okay. If no further questions, we'll seek a mover for the motion, please. Councillor Lockett is a mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A procedural, but a lengthy one. I often got weighed down with the wording of this one as a great example by Mr. Ledden before. It's the governance which helps manage the excellent volunteer work that keeps our communities thriving. So there's some amazing volunteers that have spent tireless hours and hours over many years making these great, community groups flourish. So, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank those committees, also for them moving to Zoom and keeping things going where possible. Obviously, with the pandemic, there's been a pretty significant shift in being able to meet. So I think I sit on the Southern Park Committee, and the guys have done a great job there adjusting, and thank the tireless work that the council staff have done putting this together, because it can seem like a fairly bureaucratic procedural one, but it's been a lengthy, very important one. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. To Councillor Smith as a seconder. You're just on mute there, Councillor Smith. It took 33 minutes before we got one.
Yeah, thank you. Further to what I'd like to second this motion, along with the attachment to item 4. If that was that in the motion item until membership review. Yep. So I'd just like to second that. Again, similar to the two previous motions, this is an update due to the Government Act. We have one delegated committee and 3 or 4 asset committees. So I think hopefully it will make the management of these easier and more transparent to operate. So I'd like to second that. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillor wishing to speak to this motion? Okay. Would you like to summarise, Councillor Lockett?
No further need. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, councillors, I should have vote on item 4. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, the delegations to the Port of Port Fairy Delegated Committee. Mr. Ledden to introduce this. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, councillors, and following on again, as I said from the previous report, now that the new committee is established, we only have one delegated committee now, being the Port of Port Fairy. So that it requires its delegations. What this report puts forward is the previous delegations now become an instrument to the Port Board. As I said, they're the same as they were previously, and this is pretty much a procedural report to empower the new committee. So again, happy to take questions, Mayor, and the delegations are set out in the attachment.
Any questions for Mr. Ledden? Okay, I'll seek a mover, please. Seek a mover of the motion. Councillor Ryan is the mover, seconded by Councillor Wolf. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As again outlined by Mr. Ledden, this is a procedural motion. It's been a long time coming to fruition. We first started talking to our committees nearly 4 years ago, and I think probably most of them forgot it was in the wind, but it's great to see it come before council, and I commend it to my fellow councillors.
Councillor Ryan. Councillor Wolf.
I will reserve, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other councillor wishing to speak to this motion? Okay, back to you. Oh, sorry, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support the motion, and yeah, I'd like to see the committee continuing doing the great work they're doing, and yeah, nice diversity on the committee going forward, and would be fantastic. Thank you.
Councillor Lockett, no final comments. Speaking to the motion. Okay, back to Councillor Wolf as a reserve.
I just concur with the introduction and the comments made by councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Ryan.
Put it to the vote, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors putting item 5 to the vote. All those in favour? Yes, carried 7-0. Item 6, governance rules, to be presented by Director of Community and Corporate Services for Mr. Ledden. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Continuing the heavy theme on governance matters today, councillors. This is the last one, I promise you. Well, no, a couple to go on the audit committee, but this is a really significant one. These governance rules replace, amongst other things, the meeting procedures local law number 1. So this is a really important set of rules for the council. Gives more flexibility to the council if they wish to change the rules going forward, unlike a local law, which required government gazettal processes, amongst other things. So I think that is a real bonus. Under our new Local Government Act, we want more flexibility. It's more in tune with a modern council's needs. So I think that is a positive. But getting back to the principles of openness and transparency, this is how the council operates, amongst other things. So as the report sets out, the new governance rules address mayors and chairs and appointments, delegated committees, meeting preparation, so agenda preparation, etc., roles and conduct, mayor, councillor, CEO, executive, conflicts of interest, which again have changed under the new Act, the general conduct of meetings, very important, how the council conducts its business and arrives at decisions, conduct of debate, inclusion of the election period policy that we'll be shortly going into surrounding the new council election, and also use of the common seal. So they're quite comprehensive, councillors. They have been through workshop, but the beauty, I think, is that should council decide that it wanted to change these rules in the future, that's a resolution of council. So much more flexibility. So again, won't go into detail in the rules. I think council's been through them before, but happy to take questions, Mayor. But the recommendation is that council adopt the governance rules as attached to the report.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions for Mr. Ledden? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Lockett is the mover, and seconded by Councillor Parker. Thank you. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To quote Councillor Wolf from our previous discussions prior to this meeting, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think these are extremely important matters, governance rules, which we adhere to, and they've been working. So whilst you could see that there's not a huge amount of Socratic dialogue and debate going on about these matters. We've workshopped them, we've discussed them at length, we've been following them the last 4 years, other councillors a lot longer. They've been working, so they're very important and they're in place for a reason, and no further comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Very comprehensive document, 40 pages in length. So it does cover quite a large area of governance for local government. More flexibility than the previous one, as Mr. Ledden said. However, it is still governed by the Local Government Act. So councils aren't free to do whatever they like. They are still within the parameters of the Local Government Act. A very comprehensive and useful and necessary document for all councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Raise your hand. Okay, Councillor Lockett would like to summarise.
Thank you, Mayor. No further need. Thank you.
Okay, councillors, putting item 6 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 6-7-0. Moving on to item 7, Tyrone Power Station, extension of time to incorporated plan. This will be presented by our Executive Manager for Major Projects, Michelle Granger.
This report deals with a request to extend the commencement time for the Tyrone gas-fired power station. Planning provisions were incorporated into the Moyne planning scheme following an EES process. They involved 3 provisions. So 1, a special use zone, which allows as of right the development of the gas-fired power station. 2, the incorporated plan, which provides for roadworks and native vegetation in association with the development of the plan. And 3rd, there was an environmental significance overlay applied to land around the power station, which triggers a need for a permit for a dwelling or accommodation based on a buffer of around 1 kilometre. Council has previously granted 1 extension to the commencement date from 2012 to 2016 and 2016 to 20. The applicant is now seeking another 6-year extension, and that is the recommendation before you.
Any questions for Ms Granger? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Lockett as the mover, and seconded by.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. With a recommendation of a reduction in the amount of years.
Yep. 2
years. Commence
Sorry.
the project.
4 years, was it?
Yes.
4. Okay. Yep. Do we have a seconder for that change recommendation? Yep. Councillor Ryan. Okay. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, well, Councillor Ryan can go into further detail, but this, project was first approved back in 2012, I believe, and they're seeking another 15 years. That's a long, long time. So I'll be happy to look at extending, but only for 4 years and then to reassess. Thank you.
Councillor Lockett. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In accepting this resolution, I just would like to make a couple of points. AGL have indicated that the gas to be used to service this facility will be from imported gas. At a workshop approximately 2 years ago, they indicated that to myself and fellow councillors, and to follow recent developments and to look at their website. They're in the presently developing a $300 million facility at Crib Point, which will be a gas import terminal. They intend to supply the southeastern part of Australia with imported gas. There's 5 key problems with this terminal that have been highlighted by Environment Victoria, and I think it's important to note them here because the gas from there will be supplying this terminal. Those 5 key problems is deeply unpopular and has no social licence from the local community. 2, Australia has plenty of gas. 3, it will not reduce gas prices. 4, it will increase climate pollution. And 5, it threatens Western Port Bay marine life, local ecosystems, etc., and local businesses. There is adequate gas supply in our region here, presently being obtained at Port Campbell, and there's other gas reserves that can be obtained or accessed through conventional gas exploration. So even though I second this motion, I does come with that concerns. In seconding the motion, I acknowledge that it's better to have a gas-fired power station than a coal-fired power station, and I commend my thoughts to my fellow councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'll speak to the motion as well regarding the extension of time. If it was first granted in 2012 and the motion, as we said today, goes to April 2024, that's 12 years to commence the project. So the need to have it much further than that, and I'll be starting to question the warehousing process, although the report does say that it's not at that point in time, or not to this date, looking like it's being warehoused. But I do have concerns, and if we took it further than 2004, then the next term of council would have absolutely no say in the planning of that power station. So I think we need to at least keep it to a 4-year term so that we can in fact monitor what's happening. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Councillor Dugas.
Yeah, well, speak against the motion.
Yep, go ahead.
First of all, in the recommendation, it's got 2026. I've never heard, no one said today that we're going to change that in the recommendation. We're talking about 4 years. Is that what we intend to do?
Yes, Councillor Dugas, changed to 4 years, so it'll be 2024.
2024. Just ask for the record because we're talking about 4 years, but no one said change the recommendation. So thank you for that. And as you know, I will be voting against the extension of time for various reasons.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dugas. Any other councillors speaking for or against the motion? Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Lockett in summary.
Just Councillor Smith nearly fell out of his chair then, Mr. Mayor.
Apologies, yes, I will. Councillor Smith, missed you there. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm speaking in support of this motion of extending the time. These projects traditionally take a long time to get off the ground. And I also heard what Councillor Ryan said in his statement there, that using imported gas, but this probably goes back to the moratorium that's been on onshore gas exploration in this region that has been imposed over the last few years, which has only just been recently lifted, which has resulted in us having to rely on imported gas, which is absolutely ridiculous. But hopefully, by the time this gets built, there may be gas found in our region and we can supply this locally. So, yeah, I'm just supporting the motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Smith. And thanks for that, Councillor Lockett. So, yeah, just back to you as a summary. Thanks.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, can I have a quick clarification?
Councillor Dugas, you have already said you're going to vote against it.
Yeah, but I need a clarification, please. which is neither one.
We'll
It
grant
says
clarification.
here, we talk about a kilometre buffer zone. My question is to Ms Granger. Under the Act, Planning Act, is a kilometre buffer zone in the Act, or is it just something that we've applied, or is the Act say it can be 500 metres or 350?
Through you, Mayor, the buffer zone is reflected in the planning scheme by an environmental significance overlay, which sits on top of the farming zone, and it was based on a decibel level, which equated to a kilometre.
And that's something that we, the council, has put in.
The Minister for Planning, when he amended the planning scheme, put that provision in.
Right, that it's based on decibels.
That's correct.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Dugas, for the last clarification there. We'll just sum up with Councillor Locke. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm obviously a big fan of renewable energy, and I believe we're in a transition to renewable energy, and fossil fuels are hopefully being phased out. But I have the lights on and the heater now as we speak, and we're still in a transition. So I think giving 4 years is, you know, enough time that hopefully we're either on with it and it's happening, or as the others have pointed out about possibly using gas from the region, or, you know, it gives them a little bit more time. These projects, wind farms, gas, that, you know, they all do take a long, long time. So I think 4 years is fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillors, we're voting on item 7. All those in favour? Councillor Mead, Lockett, Ryan, Parker, and Wolf and Smith in favour, and those voting against
Is me.
Councillor Dukas voting against. So motion's carried 6-1. Moving on to item 8, Mortlake gas-fired power station expansion project for the traffic management plan. Ms Granger again, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Last council meeting, council considered expansion project with the Mortlake gas-fired power station and approved the construction environmental management plan and the development plan to allow stage 2 commence, and asked to bring the traffic management plan back to this meeting so you have further time to consider it. The traffic management plan looks at the range of traffic movements associated with the development, both heavy and light vehicle movements. It looks at not only council roads, but Vic roads, but mainly from council, it's Connewarren Lane. It estimates the number of vehicles throughout an 18-month construction period. It factors in a road quality audit process that picks up where maintenance issues need to be addressed to ensure our road is safe and fit for traffic. It incorporates levies for non-compliance. It's recommended that we now approve this traffic management plan.
Thanks, Ms Granger. Firstly, I'll ask for any questions and clarifications before seeking a mover. Scrolling across the screen, no hands up. Okay, we'll go to a mover. Looking for a mover for this motion. Councillor Smith is a mover, seconded by Councillor Parker. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pleasure in moving this motion. It's in the Mortlake region. A very comprehensive document, 68 pages, detailing the movements of material in and out and focusing on Connewarren Lane. But I think the important thing to note is the levy system, which we've had problems with in the past, of agreeing compliance with traffic management plans on the projects within the Shire. And I think this gives the Shire an opportunity to control or impose a levy on non-compliant vehicles. This project will be a major benefit to the Mortlake region and the Moyne Shire. It's using local gas produced out of Port Campbell. So I'd like to support the motion. I'd like to move the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker.
Reserve, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Okay. Councillor Parker as a reserve.
Thank you. I look at this traffic management plan and I reflect back on the traffic management plan that was put in place for the Macarthur Wind Farm some 10 or 12 years ago. And I think Moyne has learned many lessons over the time with our major projects, and each traffic plan is an improvement on the last. And I think this one that has compliance and conditions within it that haven't been included in previous ones is even a better plan than we have had previously. So hopefully from the lessons that we've learned previously, this one will be without too many problems. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Councillor Smith, in summary.
Yeah, look, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I hope, just reflecting on Councillor Parker's words, I hope that there is no problems with traffic management plan, because it has been a problem in the past. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Okay, councillors, putting item 8 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Item 9, Moyne Business Recovery from COVID-19, to be presented by the Director of Economic Development and Planning, Mr. Brett Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. So this report provides an overview of business recovery initiatives and a forum for council to canvass other measures that we've been up to over the recent period, the last 6 months. From a business support perspective, economic development, tourism and communications teams in particular have been adapting workloads and priorities to support Moyne's businesses in these unprecedented times. Just a few things that I'll call out in the report for the councillors' information. According to RemPlan, based on recent ABS data, it's estimated that as of June 2020, 20% of local businesses have so far applied for JobKeeper support, and business eligible for this have had to have experienced a decline in revenue of at least 30%. Council has had a dedicated web page for COVID business support since day one, e-newsletters, the Looking Out for Moyne campaign, supporting our businesses in particular, adopted budget initiatives, particular relating to rate freezes and rent waivers, and call those out, prioritising local trades. The Business Adaptation Service, which was our pilot and substantive program, pleased to say was a significant success, to the point where, as of last week, the state government has mirrored what we've done some months ago in putting that together. And I commend that to the team that pulled that together initially for the support for our businesses. Importantly, that includes eligible business owners receiving mentoring sessions with experienced professionals, including the future of their businesses and also mental health support services. The Economic Development Advisory Committee continues to meet regularly. Initially set up to be quarterly, it now meets monthly and has provided regular updates through making contact with our local businesses and training programs. Finally, we've also had the Buy Local campaign, which will be commencing shortly. We've employed people through the Working for Victoria program, and the tourism business engagement and marketing side of things has been a standout in the state. Moyne has excelled with over 200 new businesses signing up, which according to the Great Ocean Road Regional Tourism Board is the highest rate across the state. The campaign planning and execution with the Great Sleepover campaign is well underway. We also have had event support in carrying over budget for cancelled events. So those events that the council has approved previously that have budget in track, that can be carried over to the ensuing year. Just to conclude, council will continue to support the Moyne economy through the economic stimulus and support as recognised by the adopted budget, and we will provide regular updates through this forum.
Thanks very much, Mr. Davis. Item 9 is for our information, but I invite any comments or feedback from councillors on the matter. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to commend the officers on what has been done to date and the way that they have kept council and the community up to date with what is going. I think this is a wonderful report that perhaps should be put onto our website, should people like to have a look at it, and through our other media outlets, particularly social media. And I'd just like to move that we note the report.
Okay, Councillor Parker's moved that we note it, seconded by Councillor Lockett with his hand up already. So, Councillor Lockett, would like to speak to it as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Parker's comments, and it was great to hear Mr. Davies talking about mental health support. You know, it's been a very difficult time for all of us, and you know, just encourage people to seek support if they require it. Also to highlight about, whilst this is support for businesses, there is also the ongoing support through our festival and events programs. As we know, most events, well, pretty much all events this year have been cancelled, and next year a lot of events will be cancelled. The Port Fairy Folk Festival, the Jazz Festival. We don't know yet about the Irish Festival, but a lot of events next year are going to be cancelled. So, you know, council is doing everything they can to support these events and also to encourage them to do online things. And so, yeah, just like to again commend the work that the officers are doing, and the bringing together, the looking out for Moyne campaign and things like that are really, really crucial. And I think they're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Any other councillors wishing to speak to item 9? Okay, I'll just have a comment that, yeah, just like to add to the comments made, to thank the Economic Development team. They've done a terrific job since the beginning of doing what we can to help our business through this. It's one of the great assets of the Moyne Shire is our, you know, plethora of small businesses we have to offer visitors and residents, you know, for business opportunities and for custom. So it's great to be able to help these businesses wherever we can, but also like to urge feedback to councillors or to the Economic Development team. If you think there's anything else we could be doing to help small business through the COVID situation, we certainly welcome that feedback, as we have all the way through, and do our best to help businesses get through the situation and come out the other side. Okay, so we've moved the motion from the floor. So we'll vote to note the report as has been moved. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Thank you. We'll move on to item 10, wind farms in Moyne, introduced by Mr. Davis, Director of Economic Development and Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. The officer's recommendation here is that council reaffirm its current position opposing new wind farms in Moyne Shire and seek further discussion with the state government on implementing the recommendations of the National Wind Farm Commissioner. Council has an existing resolution that opposes any further wind farms until the state government implements changes to the decision-making framework to incorporate recommendations from the National Commissioner. The level of wind energy in Moyne is still the most significant and concentrated across Victoria. That's illustrated by the attachment to the report that has mapped the cumulative impacts by putting the Moyne Shire overlaid over metropolitan Melbourne, that demonstrates that there's over 550,000 hectares in Moyne Shire, 67,000 which is occupied by wind farms. That's a significant amount in anyone's terms. It's timely for council to reaffirm their position and seek a new round of engagement with the state government.
All right, thanks, Mr. Davis. Do we have any questions on this before we seek a mover? No. All right, we'll seek a mover, please. Move to the motion. Councillor Ryan, to the mover, seconded by Councillor, looking across the screen, seconded by Councillor Lockett. Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'll start by saying I'll where do you start with this issue? I'll highlight one of the issues involved in this, and I'll leave it up to other councillors to talk about others. In DELWP's annual reports, they have a heading under our community charter and operating model, states a community-centred approach that involves the active engagement of communities and key stakeholders and policies that affect them. I'll take you to, it's a letter signed by the Executive Director of Statutory Planning Services of DELWP back in September of 18. And it's in reply to a Hawkesdale resident who wrote a letter seeking that the planned Hawkesdale wind farm be moved back from the town of Hawkesdale. And it includes at paragraph 4, and the right had referenced the 2017 Wind Commissioner's report in relation to the moving back of wind farms from small communities. In the reply at paragraph 4, as I said, states, the National Wind Farm Commissioner's 2017 annual report includes recommendations that are advice to government and industry. These will be considered and may provide useful input for developing future planning policy. However, they do not form part of the planning scheme and are not a relevant consideration for determining a planning permit application. So, even back then, what the township of Hawkesdale wanted was not even considered. I'll take you to the motion that I moved on in November of that year, where we sought to have the recommendations from the Wind Farm Commissioner's 2017 report implemented. Number of recommendations 821 to 827. I'll just refer to 823. And that recommendation was prospecting for new wind farm development sites should be subject to an approval to prospect requirement issued by the responsible authority before prospecting commences. The approval to prospect would be granted on a range of criteria, including the suitability of the proposed site as well as the credentials of the developer and key personnel. I'll take you to the letter received by Council on the 24th of this month from DELWP, from Colleen White, the Regional Director. At paragraph 4, it makes reference to the REZ, which is Renewable Energy Zone. Now, if I could have a clarification from Ms. Granger in regarding to the Renewable Energy Zone that has been suggested by state and federal governments, and what does that zone mean to this area?
The Renewable Energy Zone, Councillor Ryan, refers to areas where there are opportunities to have further development of renewable energy projects.
Yeah, and that zone, what is it Moyne Shire, or how big is the zone?
It's wider than Moyne Shire, but Moyne Shire is a significant part of it.
So the Renewable Energy Zone means that a developer is able to apply for a wind farm permit in the southwest region rather than down to Pacific areas.
It highlights areas where there's capability for projects to link into existing transmission lines and where future transmission zones will be provided across the state. So our zone already has the existing 500 kV line.
But it doesn't prohibit localised areas.
No. No.
So, councillors, that is how much consideration the DELP and federal government have placed on the request of our council into giving us some type of control over where these wind farms are developed. And that's just one of the failings of this government and federal government in relation to Moyne Shire. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Lockett, the seconder.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just seek a clarification with the mover, if possible. The current motion that stands before us is, bear with me, that council reaffirm its position opposing new wind farms in Moyne Shire and seek further discussion, blah, blah, blah. But the previous motion that we had doesn't have that wording. It says, we oppose new wind farms unless they implement the recommendations of the Wind Farm Commissioner. So I don't think this current motion is as it should be. And I just want to seek the mover's recommendation about that, because the previous one is different to what we've got here.
Councillor Ryan is the mover. If you'd like to comment on that. Yeah, and then I can make a comment if you like. You're on mute there, Councillor Ryan.
I see the current recommendation as, yeah, I'd welcome anyone else's input into their suggestions, but I see it as satisfactory. Over to you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, and Mr. Millard had your hand up there for a clarification.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And Councillor Lockett, I guess be reassured that this doesn't mean that we don't continue to act on that previous motion of the council. This is really, refreshing our action in this case.
Okay, Councillor Lockett, does that clarify your question?
It does, but I think, we're saying we're opposing new wind farms, but if they do the things that we are asking for, of including the Wind Farm Commissioner's recommendations, are we then still opposed to them? No, that was our previous motion of council. So I feel that I'm not too happy with supporting the motion as it stands.
Okay. All right, so you second it, but you speak against it. Yeah.
I just wanted to see if Councillor Ryan would slightly change it.
No, well, that's been
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Ryan.
I understand what Councillor Lockett is saying. If we took out the word opposing, and put it in regarding.
My recommendation, if this is okay, Mr. Mayor, through you, is similar to the previous one, that council reaffirm its current position opposing new wind farms in the Moyne Shire until the Wind Farm Commissioner's points are included. The points being the previous one in the previous motion.
Okay, Councillor Ryan, you've put forward your suggestion that you want to change it. That's the one you're running with?
Look, if I could ask for Councillor Lockett just to read his again.
Sorry, I'm still working on it. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. So, that council reaffirm its current position opposing new wind farms in the Moyne Shire, bear with me, until the state government immediately implements recommendations 8.2.1 to 8.2.7 contained, I hope someone's writing this down, contained in the 2017 Office of National Wind Farm Commissioners report to Parliament and its recommendation is implemented, Moyne Shire Council shall oppose any further wind farm developments in the Moyne Shire. Sorry, that last sentence doesn't make sense.
If I could help at all there, it says the officer's recommendation is that the council reaffirm its current position, and you have just read out the current position.
Yeah,
Councillor Lockett. So I don't personally see the need to put all that extra in there, because that current position is referred further on down in the document. So but Councillor Ryan is the mover, has the final say, and I ask that final say now, and then we'll get moving with the seconder and debate. Councillor Ryan.
I'll read it. The council reaffirm its current position regarding new wind farms in the Moyne Shire and seek further discussion with state government on implementing the recommendations of the National Wind Farm Commissioner.
Rightio. We've changed one word from opposing to regarding. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Lockett is a seconder. Councillor Ryan has spoke to it already, so Councillor Lockett, you speak to the motion.
Reserve my right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'm just wondering, in the motion, look, I'm very much supportive of it, but I'm just wondering whether we should include state and federal government, because we're seeking it's the National Wind Farm Commissioner, so he is responding to the federal government, and I'm just wondering whether Councillor Ryan would agree that it's just a slight change, but the state and both federal government all have an input into these wind farms, and it's a National Wind Farm Commissioner's report, which goes to the federal government. So I can't see why we shouldn't be including the federal government in this. Thank you.
Councillor Ryan for a response.
Could I have a clarification from Ms. Granger, please? How much federal legislation involves wind farm development in the Moyne Shire?
The decision-making on wind farms is of the state government. Policy around setting emissions targets involves both the state and federal government.
Councillor Ryan, you happy to leave it as it is?
Yes, I am.
Thanks. Okay, Councillor Smith, you can continue with speaking to the motion.
Oh, look, that's fine if Councillor Ryan's happy with it, but I just thought that we've got nothing to lose by including the federal government in it. That was all, because it's a National Wind Farm Commissioner and he's across all states. And I just thought, but if Councillor Ryan is happy with it, I'm more than happy to run with it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors speaking to the motion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dukas to speak to the motion.
The first line reads, the council reaffirm its current position regarding new wind farms, right? And it's all about our old position, and our old position says that we oppose. So changing that, does that make any difference or not? Because if we took our current position regarding new wind farms, then it's one and the same thing, or am I reading it wrong?
Well, if it's the same
anyway,
thing,
by the way,
because the motion has been moved as regarding and seconded, so that is now what we're discussing.
Well, I just thought somebody could answer that question. I'll be voting against the motion. I'd like to keep my my powder dry and assess all applications as they come forward without predetermining a position. In relation to that letter we've got from the government, from DELWP, can someone tell me this integrated system plan, where do we get a copy of that? And does the council, or has the council had discussions and have known about it, what, for weeks or months or how long?
Ms. Granger might be able to help with that. Councillor Dugas.
The integrated system plan is a document that has been released by the Australian Energy Market Operator, so AEMO. Council did make a submission to the documents they had on exhibition, and that submission was workshopped with council before we sent it off.
Right. So the integrated system plan, when do we get a copy of that?
We could provide you links to your AEMO website so you can have a look at that information, Councillor Dukas.
Okay, thank you. Another point I'd like to make is the term lived experience in the third paragraph. This DELP report is more about trying to soften us up. It's got nothing to do with treating the community fairly. I thought a lived experience would be one that you look forward to. I can't see you can have a lived experience if you're surrounded by wind farms. That's another point I'd like to make. And they talk about allowing new large-scale renewable energy and transmission facilities. I mean, and another paragraph talks about cumulative impact.
Point of order, Mr.
How can you lessen?
Yeah,
Mayor, if I can.
Councillor Wolf.
We've diverged from the actual debate and the motion. Now we're talking about a DELP letter. It's got nothing to do with it. This motion and recommendation by Councillor Ryan is in relation to our business and our thoughts and our approach to state government. So can we keep it on track, please?
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Dukas, we just asked you to wrap up on speaking to the motion, please.
So what have I said that's not in regard to the motion? I mean, our motion says that we oppose wind farms in the Moyne Shire until what's his name, the commissioner's recommendations are implemented. And here we have a letter from DELP saying quite the opposite.
Yep. So, Councillor Dukas, you're welcome. As you've said, you vote against it, so you're welcome to.
I'm just highlighting the fact why I'll be voting against it.
No problem. You've done that. Thank you very much, Councillor Dukas. Thank you. We will seek any other councillors wishing to speak for or against the motion who hasn't spoke already.
We must be pro wind farms.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. We'll just stick to those that have the floor.
I haven't finished in relation to this.
No, Councillor Dukas, you have finished. Thanks. You've had a good crack. I'll make a comment now before we go back to the mover, Councillor Ryan. Look, I think it's a shame that we have to be in this position again. It's been almost 2 years since the Minister, DELP, and the wind farms have had a chance to show some regard to our motion back then. So far, all they seem to do is showing very little interest, if any, on our proposals that we put forward back then. I think it's good timing to reiterate our position to all parties, and that Moyne's position hasn't changed, that we don't want any more wind farms, that enough is enough until those recommendations are adhered to, and it's shown, and as been shown already, they've got very little interest in doing that. So the position remains that enough is enough and no more wind farms in Moyne. And just to add to that, even those that are in the Shire that are looking to, put in a planning application and wish to do any sort of community contributions, for me, that doesn't change my position on where we stand on council. Enough is enough, and if wind farms want to do that with their money, that is their choice. And look, also just going on potential new wind farms, or continually being secretly prospect across the Shire is apparently still continuing, despite what we asked for nearly 2 years ago, asking nicely then. So hopefully this reiteration really does ring true to the wind farms, that we don't want any more wind farms in the Moyne Shire as it currently stands. So please stop prospecting and at least, listen to what our motion said back then. And also, of course, we asked for another meeting with Minister Wynne to try and reaffirm our position and get a bit more action on where we stand as a Shire, because it'd be good to also meet with the local Labor representatives in the upper house, Gail Teeney and Jala Pulford, because as we know, council, I believe, should have greater input in the planning process, because we are the ones that are, the closest level of government to the community, and to represent our community, but we get very little say when it comes to wind farms and the massive impacts they have on the Moyne Shire. So that is my comment to item 10. So we'll go back to Councillor Ryan to summarise. Thanks.
I reserve.
Councillor Lockett reserves, so we'll go back to Councillor Lockett first.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I am pro wind farms and I'm pro renewable energies, absolutely. But there's a massive cost at it. The industrialisation of the landscape up in the northern part of the Shire has been occurring. There is a cumulative impact which we're concerned about. I don't have a turbine out my front yard, but a lot of the residents do. There's 67,000 hectares of land covered in the Moyne Shire, covered with wind farms. Wind farms and renewables are the future, but at what point can the whole Shire be covered in wind farms? You know, if this was nuclear power or coal power, there would be an absolute outrage occurring. And some of the residents are quite anti-wind farms, and we can see why when they're surrounded by them. So we really want these implementations of the Wind Farm Commissioner's report added into practice. We're sick of advocating time and time again to say we recommend a minimum of 2 kilometres from a house or further, 5 kilometres, but we're not being listened to. So that's why we're having this kind of strong stance and again reiterating our position. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Ryan to summarise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, may I say that Moyne Shire ratepayers are not being shown the due respect by our state government. The proliferation of wind farms in our Shire is quite amazing. If you just look at the area north of Koroit and Port Fairy, we have Hawkesdale, Willatook, MacArthur Hawkesdale, Ryan's Corner and Mulsaw. Now there are 5 wind farms that are either operating, being built or seeking a permit, highlighting the Hawkesdale wind farm, which is just too close to the town of Hawkesdale, and then we are and they are not being listened to. In voting for this motion, all councillors who vote for it are opposing the development of wind farms until those 7 recommendations from the Wind Farm Commissioner's 2017 report are being implemented. The Wind Farm Commissioner was appointed to address problems with wind farms. All his recommendations, if implemented, would go a long way into solving our problems. State government is just not listening, and it's time that they listen, and they listen now to Moyne Shire, because it is unsatisfactory with how our ratepayers are being treated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Okay, councillors, item 10, wind farms in Moyne, put to the vote, please. All those in favour? Councillor Mead, Lockett, Ryan, Parker, Smith and Wolf in favour. Those against? Councillor Dukas is against. Motion's carried 6-1. Item 11, Planning and Environment Act 1987, appointment and authorisations. Mr. Davis to present, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Briefly, this report is provided to update the appointment and authorisation of council officers pursuant to section 1, subsection 4 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. As a result of a number of changes to staff positions, the appointment and authorisation under this Act requires updating.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Any questions for Mr. Davis? Item 11. All right, we'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Parker as a mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Parker.
Another procedural recommendation. I have nothing further to say.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this report's been prepared with association with Maddox the lawyers, and I think it is, we cannot delegate power unless it's been authorised. So I'd just like to move, second the motion. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Any other councillors wishing to speak to this motion? Okay. Councillor Parker sounds no need to summarise. You okay? Okay. Item 11 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Item 12, planting of trees and other vegetation on municipal roadsides policy, presented by the Director of Infrastructure and Environment, Mr. Trevor Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. This policy is being presented as part of our four-yearly cycle review. The policy intent really hasn't changed. All we've done is updated the titles and dates within the policy. But as I said, the intent of the policy remains the same. So we're recommending that the council endorse the revised policy tonight, but I'm happy to take questions, Mayor.
Any questions for Mr. Greenberger? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Question, Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Odd question, but it's something I've thought about a bit. Is there anything in this policy which would prevent or encourage or allow someone to grow fruit and or citrus, specifically lemon or lime trees, on a roadside? It would be lovely to drive along and pick a heap of lemons. Is that something?
Mr. Greenberger?
Theft.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Not for me. I'm not horticulturally skilled or have a lot of knowledge in that area, but I'm not sure how many lemon trees or orange trees are actually native to Australia, and that's part of the policy. But if they are native to Australia, it's certainly something that could be looked at, subject to all the other provisions within the policy.
Councillor Lockett, follow-up question.
So non-native lemon trees couldn't be planted?
So the policy provides for, sorry, through you there, the policy provides for native trees as a preferred species to be planted.
Okay, any further questions for Mr. Greenberg on item 12? Yeah. Councillor Lockett has another final question.
Finish it out. So olive trees or fruiting trees of the variety that were non-native, they could be negotiated with council to be planted?
Through you, Mayor, so I'll take you to page 2 of the policy, Councillor Lockett, and it refers to the very first paragraph. All vegetation is to be native to Australia and to be in accordance with the relevant ecological vegetation class to ensure that they are suitable to the local area. That would be the key consideration with any tree that was proposed.
Thank you. I'm aware of that, but is there flexibility for negotiations to be had with council about possible said fruiting trees?
Through you, Mayor, the officer would evaluate any application in accordance with this policy. If the applicant wasn't satisfied with the officer's assessment, they could ask it to be brought to council.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Councillor Lockett will move the motion, and seconded by Councillor Ryan. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for answering those questions. It's something I've been thinking about a lot as I've been riding around Port Fairy trying to find lemon trees. A good one that we've branched out on, and I really appreciate the thorough work which has occurred by Mr. Greenberger and his team regarding this, deeply rooted in the council documents policy. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Councillor Ryan? You're on mute there.
Sorry, nothing further to add. Well covered by Councillor Lockett.
Any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? I'll make comment just to refer to in the policy the 4 objectives. On the 4th dot point, or the 3rd dot point as well, to ensure that any vegetation planned on the road reserve requires minimum maintenance. Is minimum should be no maintenance, because it's my belief that we have enough trees already on our, or vegetation on our roadsides to maintain. And then dot point 4 is to ensure that vegetation planned on road reserves does not cause a potential danger or impediment to property fences or private property. That's also a critical one that we have ongoing issues with already with the trees that are already there. So it would have to be, in my view, although it's delegated to the officers, have to be an exceptional situation where we would grant planting of trees or other vegetation on municipal roadsides, just because of the issues we've had in the past with overgrown vegetation causing issues with fire risk during fires, etc. So, and also falling on fences as well, it is an ongoing issue. So that's my view. Any other councillors wishing to speak on the motion? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, clarification. This seems to be more in line with small towns, etc. Where's it stand with rural roadsides? Because if we got suckers growing in drains, etc., that's going to upset the road reserve. We've got suckers growing along fence lines that fall over fences. It tells us here that none of that's allowed to happen, but the Shire is about as guilty as anybody. I mean, most of the problems out in the rural area where trees interfere with fences and drains is the Shire's own fault. So we're going to implement our own policy in relation to that?
Through you, Mayor, I'm not going to talk about whose fault trees and fence lines are or anything like that, but what I will say is that the scope of this policy is, in fact, to do with rural road reserves. It's separate to a street tree plan that we have for our townships. So this policy does consider those roads outside our townships and does consider things like, will it impact on fences, will it impact on traffic vision, etc., etc. So that is the main reason for the policy and why it's been brought to council.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors will speak for or against the motion? All right, Councillor Lockett as the mover.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In summary, I've had a correspondence from a local horticulturalist expert that has illuminated me to the fact that the finger lime is a native tree in Australia. So that's exciting to note, but I'll leave that one there. No further need. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Okay, councillors putting item 12 to the vote. All those in favour? Councillors Mead, Lockett, Parker, Ryan, Smith and Wolf. Those against?
Yep, that's me.
Councillor Dukas against. So the motion carried 6-1. Item 13, Audit and Risk Committee minutes to be presented by Mr. Ledden.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillors, as standard practice, the minutes of the last Audit and Risk Committee are presented for council. And just probably reminding us, given we've re-established the committee today, but the important role it plays in council's governance and compliance framework. So we've got a couple other reports coming now to around the structure of the new committee under the new Act. But looking at the work that it does and the contribution of the independent members, and we have 2 councillors. So we've got Mayor Councillor Mead and also Councillor Wolf been on that committee. So I think it's important to note the work being done by that important committee. Recommendation that the council note the confirmed minutes.
Well, thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions firstly? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please. Mover to the motion. Councillor Ryan is the mover. Seconded by Councillor Parker. Councillor Ryan, any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, may I say that it's good that these minutes are included in our agenda, and they are obviously available for the whole world to see. It shows that Moyne Shire is adhering to good governance and that the checks and balances are in place to make sure that things are being done well and correct, highlighted by the fact of the independent and highly qualified members on the audit committee who oversee the management of Moyne Shire. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Councillor Parker?
Thank you, Mayor. Just noting that the minutes were confirmed in June, and I'm assuming that when the June minutes are in fact circulated to council, we'll be able to read those too. But it's good that the committees do in fact put their minutes up for public viewing. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Parker. Any other councillors' comments to speak?
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Dukas?
Thank you. Under the number 12, compliance, were there any reports on investigations?
Mr. Ladden?
Through you, Mayor. Councillor Dugas, I'd have to go back and check the agenda, but normally we have the reports from the Local Government Inspectorate, any ombudsmans or VARGO reports. So, and from memory, I think it might have been the report around matters at Ballarat City Council, for instance, but I'd have to take it on notice. But they're the sort of things that we use as good practice to review our practices against. And you might recall previously there was a couple of reports on poor practices at some councils, and again we've used that as a template.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Ladden? No. Any further people speaking for or against? Councillor Ryan is the mover.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor. Put it to the vote.
Councillors putting item 13 to the vote. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Item 14. Item 14, sorry. Audit and Risk Committee Management Charter. Mr. Ledden again.
Thanks, Mayor. So, councillors, another update of a charter, this time our Audit and Risk Committee charter, as a result of the 2020 Local Government Act again. So we've had a number of requirements put up under the stage 1 requirements of transitioning to the new act. The Audit Committee had a charter. The changes that have been made to the charter are set out on the second page of the report. And the 5 items that are included in addition to the previous charter, that we must establish the committee. That's been done today. It must report twice yearly to council. Previously it was annually. The majority of the committee members must be independent, and in the very next report we'll satisfy that requirement by adding a 3rd independent member to the 2 council representatives on the committee. They must undertake self-assessment and adopt an annual work plan, which we did have. So again, most of those things have been covered up by a previous charter, but this updates our Audit and Risk Committee charter, and it is using an industry-wide template. So a number of the matters that have been worked up and co-designed by local government Victoria across the sector have resulted in some consistent templates, and this is one of those. So this would be very similar to most councils' charters being adopted. Happy to take questions, Mayor, but the recommendation is that council adopt the Audit and Risk Management Committee charter as attached to this report.
Thanks, Mr. Ledden. Any questions firstly? Okay, we'll seek a mover, please.
Yes,
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Moved by Councillor Dugas, seconded by Councillor Ryan. Councillor Dugas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Something that's very important, probably the most important committee the council has, apart from the councillors. And it's good to see that there is ongoing improvement on a yearly basis at the council and its auditors, internal, external, and the state government, as well as VAGO, looking at this and from time to time make the appropriate changes to make sure that everything runs smoothly and there's no funny business going on.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Councillor Ryan.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors wishing to speak to the motion? Councillor Dugas, in summary.
No need.
Councillors, put item 14 to the vote now. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Now item 15, Audit and Risk Management Committee appointment of independent member. For Mr. Ledden to present, please.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors. And as you're aware, one of the requirements of the new Local Government Act, again, is that the Audit and Risk Committee have more independent members than councillors. So previously we've had 2 councillors and 2 independent members. So as part of that requirement, we've advertised the position, and I know around speaking to other organisations, they're a bit scarce to come by. Fortunately, in this circumstance, we got one very good applicant. So I think if you look at the application and qualifications and experience of Mr. John Duffield, I think we're very fortunate that he has applied, and it's with pleasure that he's put forward as the recommended addition as an independent member to our Audit and Risk Committee. Happy to take questions, Mayor.
Any questions for Mr. Ledden on item 15? No. Okay, we'll seek a mover then for that motion. Councillor Wolf as the mover, seconded by Councillor Smith. Councillor Wolf. You're on mute there, Councillor Wolf.
Sorry about that. And just concur with Mr. Ledden's comments. A very good applicant, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of input to this committee, which is very active. So I commend the recommendation to councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Wolf. Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is to bring us into line again with the Local Government Act. And again, I think a very capable applicant has been received. And yeah, and thank you, Mr. Duffield, for applying for the job, for the position. Thank you.
Any other councillors wishing to speak to this one? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to reiterate what Mr. Ledden said. Mr. Duffield is a quality applicant, quality person, highly respected within the Koroit community, and we're very lucky to have him on board. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ryan. Nothing further from councillors? Okay, Councillor Wolf, in summary.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, putting item 15 to the vote now. All those in favour? Carried 7-0. Councillors, up to item 16, Assemblies of Councillors, presented by Mr. Millard, CEO.
Procedure report. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just recording recent assemblies through July and August of Council.
Any questions on this one, councillors? Seeking a mover, please. Councillor Parker is a mover, seconded by Councillor Ryan. Councillor Parker.
The CEO said this is a procedural matter. There's been no questions, so I'm happy for it to be recommended to be moved.
Councillor Ryan.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Any other councillors speaking to the motion? Councillor Parker has already summarised, so we'll put the motion to the vote. All those in favour of item 16? Carried 7-0. Item 17, Mayor and Councillors report. Take that one as read and open up to any questions that councillors may have of any meetings that occurred on that list there. Councillor Smith has his hand up. Councillor Smith. You're still on mute there, Councillor Smith.
Sorry, tapped the wrong one. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just on 22nd of July, a name has cropped up, Mr. Grimley, state member for Western Victoria. It's the first time we've heard that man with all of the debate over wind farms and other things going on. Just wondering what he had to say about the Western region, that was all.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Smith. We met with Stuart Grimley via Zoom and had a chat to him about some of the issues going on at Moyne at the moment. He was keen to hear how we were going during the COVID situation and if there was any matters that he could help with as a upper house member for Western Victoria. We highlighted some of our main advocacy points at the moment, and he was interested in the Mortlake healthcare upgrades that we're advocating for now. And also we reiterated our thoughts towards wind farms, which he took an interest to as well. The CEO was in that meeting as well. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Miller?
No, I think that covers it, Mayor, although we did follow up and send his office quite a range of information that he was after.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Any further questions on any meetings listed there? Councillor Parker?
Just a comment, Mayor. On the 31st of July, you'll see the Cranewhite Regional Library Corporation was an interview. I'd like to inform councillors that the corporation has now appointed Mr. Phil Howard as our new CEO. He will be commencing duties in mid-October following the retirement of the current library CEO. Phil comes from the Shire of Strathbogie, sorry.
Thanks, Councillor Parker, for the update. Any other councillors have any questions or comments on item 17?
Oh, sorry, I have one more.
Councillor Parker?
It's noted about the Southwest Victorian Livestock Exchange Advisory Committee. I was just wondering who attended that and what that one was about, please.
Okay, I think that was Councillor Dukas.
Yeah, that's me. Thank you very much. Yeah, we had a Zoom meeting. The sale yards are going along gangbusters. They're working on the roof over the holding yards, or what they call the sea pens, and everything's looking up. The stock numbers are pretty good. I think they've increased a little bit. If I remember correctly, calves might have been down, but I think COVID might have had something to do with that. But everything's going well. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dukas. Any further questions? All right, moving on to item 18, council notice of motion, none being recorded. Item 19, general matters. Open the floor for general matters. Councillors know general matters procedure, so open that up now. Councillor Lockett, general matters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a couple. One is just a congratulations to the Moyne Shire, the Youth Council. They put on a Zoom event in collaboration with Colac Freezer and Moyne Freezer Brophy Family Services. There was an online busking competition on the 7th of August, and it was awesome. It was really entertaining. There was, a very wide range of performers, dancers and singers and, couple duos and mainly solo performances, young and, I was going to say older. But mainly youth focused, obviously, and it was fantastic. Jovi and Zoe won, Chloe Mutton came second, and Ruby McKenna came third. So congratulations to those guys, and good to see the community adapting, and obviously the youth, the future of today, we're bang on to having an online event, and it was very successful. One of the other ones I wanted to highlight was about the amount of PPE, which is being used, personal protective equipment, which is being used during the pandemic. I was listening to the ABC. There's about 10 tons of these disposable masks being put in landfill every day in Victoria. Obviously, we need to keep wearing masks. We don't know for how long, but wanted to see if there was something that the Moyne Shire can look at doing at possibly exploring. There's one company which is actually recycling the masks. Obviously, there's risks associated with that if it's got COVID all over it and someone, disposes of it. But to look at whether the Shire can explore any possibilities of setting up a recycling kind of depot or skip or something. One of the problems with these masks is, I'll demonstrate here, but this little guy here, with seabirds, they actually get caught around so there's an entanglement kind of issue with these. So if you are disposing of them, just simply rip these off before you do, because birds, and they're already washing up on beaches all around, the globe. But if we can be leaders in that space, would be fantastic. One of the other things to ask of the council staff, if they can look into while they're looking into the PPE stuff, is the plastics, which it says in our document, the numbers 1 and 2, plastic recycling and soft plastics, if we can look at possibilities of collecting and then distributing to other facilities which do recycle those materials.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. There's a couple of points there Mr. Millard may be happy to respond to.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Lockett. Probably best, Mayor, if we take those comments on board, and we'll come back with some ideas at a future workshop. I think it's probably best.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Any other councillors contributing to general matters? Oh, Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just two things. It was good to see in our financial report today that there was a variation of $60,000 for the quarry, which will come out of the quarry funds. Just reporting as chair of that advisory committee that the audit of the quarry I thought was very well done. It was very comprehensive, and I thought that the results were very good from that. There was nothing of any serious nature that came out of the audit, and I think the quarry team are to be congratulated and supported in what they do up there. And secondly, I'd just like to put a shout out to the senior staff of the Shire. We've been through COVID for quite a while now. We've talked about the economic development that the Shire's done for the residents. I'd just like to acknowledge the work that's been done by senior staff to look after our own Shire staff throughout this time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Parker. Any other general matters? All righty. Moving on. Item 20, no urgent business. Item 21, CEO meeting schedule and activities report. Mr. Millard.
Thanks, Mayor, and I'm happy to take questions on any of the meetings that are listed there as well. Probably if I just could raise a couple of matters in the activities report. Towards the end, there are actually a couple of letters that we've received, or responses we've received, about the good work that staff have done on particular projects. It is satisfying, and it probably reflects, particularly Councillor Parker's commentary just before, that the team are really trying hard and doing a great job. And you need to look no further than the Portbury Bowls Club and Macarthur Bowls Club, Tea Tree Lake footpaths. All those projects are really ploughing on as fast as we can, and we do know we've got a really significant capital works program this year, along with matters of stimulus and capital locally. So even though it's really tough, and it was quite a shock to go back into another set of restrictions, the staff generally doing a great job and still delivering everywhere we can. So happy to take questions on the report or those meetings, Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Millard. Councillor Lockett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Millard, just a quick question about the roundabout. It's probably maybe even one for Mr. Greenberger, but the work seemed to be ploughing along really well at the roundabout in Port Fairy. And it's proceeding on track.
Yeah, I'd defer to Mr. Greenberger, Mayor, if I can.
Mr. Greenberger.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for the question, Councillor Lockett. Yeah, the project is going quite well. I have to say the weather of the last few days probably hasn't helped us from the point of view of timelines, but we are striving hard to try and have the project complete before the school holidays in September. But obviously, depending on COVID restrictions, school holidays might be a different environment this year to previous years. But that's the date that we're aiming for, and we'll continue to strive for. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes, Councillor Lockett, another question.
Just a comment and a few comments that I received about on page 43 of the report, the new seats that are at Martins Point, they look fantastic and been very well received.
Thanks, Councillor Lockett. Anything further?
No, thank you.
No. Any other councillors? Any questions for the CEO? Councillor Dukas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On page 37 of 52, statutory planning, to do with the Ellerslie Panmure quarry, the latest email we got from Mr. Bodine Fowler, has anybody responded to that? That was on the 19th, 10/24 on the 19th of August.
Perhaps, Mayor, if Mr. Davis has a response, or we can take that on notice, either one.
Yes. No worries, Councillor. Yeah, Mr. Davis to respond, please.
Mayor. As far as I know, we haven't, Councillor Dukas. It's one of several from Mr. Bodine, and we have responded to the others, and we will in this case. I understand that application is about to proceed to an advertising stage, and everyone on that list will be notified.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Davis. Anything further, Councillor Dukas?
Yeah, there's one to do with a wind farm. Now, the Mortons Lane wind farm, thank you. We got an email, I think last Friday, from Leslie, which was hard to print on my printer. And if you look in our report, I'll find Morton's, here's Morton's Lane. If you go to page 19 of 52, it's got nothing in there. Operational, tells us where it is, CGN Energy. Now that report, they're years late, and the report from DELP highlighted a lot of shortcomings. And I'm just wondering why none of that was relayed in this report. I think
Mr.
there's
Miller?
about 8 non-compliances. Apart
Yeah,
from
happy to respond. Perhaps if Ms. Granger would like to respond quickly, but we do try and update these reports. So Ms. Granger might like to quickly respond.
Yeah, Councillor Dukas, that's listed for discussion at next week's workshop.
But was it too late to put something in this report? I mean, it says absolutely nothing, and that report was damning.
Yeah, I apologise that we didn't update it, but we have been working with DELP to make sure the reports now meet the requirements, and we will provide you with detail next week.
Okay,
Thanks.
and the other question was, we were going to investigate the vegetation issue out at Dundonald. Now, I've asked several times on where's that at. Now, I think we're about 6 weeks ago it was, if not 2 months. I mean, it's we could have done that at desktop with Google Earth. What seems to be the holdup?
Ms. Granger, just to quickly respond to that, and we'll keep moving.
Yeah, it's looking at our workload and our priority. So we've been trying to get a range of urgent items to you, and that's on the list still to follow up, Councillor Dukas.
After all this time?
Councillor Dukas, it'll be addressed at the workshop as Ms. Granger has suggested. Do you have any further questions?
Well, my question to you, Mr. Mayor, you're the mayor. Do You
All
think
right.
2 months is
All right.
long?
No, yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, sorry,
Is-
Councillor Dukes.
Is 2 months long enough? I mean, it's something that doesn't take 2 months to get an answer to.
Thanks, Councillor Dugas. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing the report next week at the workshop. We can have a good discussion there and further discussion about other reports that are due in the meantime. Councillor Wolf, I'll just check with you if that's all right. Yeah, that's the go. Put yourself on mute. Thanks. That's good. Unless you got something you want to raise. Any other councillors would like to ask a question in the CEO activities report? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Probably through you to Mr Davis, just a clarification for the community regarding the Detroit structure plan. In the report on page 31, it states that the final plan will be presented to today's meeting. It obviously hasn't been today. Could we have an update for the community on that, please?
Mr Davis.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct. Councillor Ryan, it'll be proceeding to the next council meeting, and I understand that invitations have gone out for the members of the community that have made submissions to present to the council at a workshop prior to as well. So yes, at the time of writing that CEO's report, it was to be put to the August meeting, but that has since moved back by one cycle.
Thanks, Mr Davis.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the CEO? All right. Thank you. Thanks, Mr Millard, for addressing those queries. We'll now seek a mover to suspend orders and move into confidential. Councillor Parker, seconded by Councillor Ryan. All those in favour?
Yep.
Carried 7-0. So take the opportunity now to thank the viewers online. We now have to deal with the very few items you have to deal with that are confidential. So thanks very much, and look forward to seeing you next time on board. Thank you.